welcome to the Holotropic Psychedelic Integration podcast, episode number 5. I am James Moran.
And I'm Art Granoff. We're going to start today with excerpts from Way of the Psychonaut, listening to Rick Tarnas, spoken by Becca Tarnas about Pluto. And here we go.
Stan and I were especially struck by the uncannily similar, indeed virtually identical sets of meanings correlating BPM-3 with the astrological Pluto. The phenomenology of the third perinatal matrix is unusually diverse and brings together a unique constellation of extremely intense experiences. In terms of the stages of biological birth, it is associated with the propulsion of the baby through the birth canal with the cervix fully dilated. Experientially, one finds a powerful convergence of experiences involving titanic elemental energy of volcanic proportions, intense arousal of sexual libido and aggression, enormous discharge of pent-up energies, dramatic experiences involving violent struggle, life and death danger, bloody biology, war, scenes of immense destruction, descent to the underworld, demonic evil, sadomasochism, pornographic sexuality, degradation and defilement, scatology, sewers and decay, purifying fire or pyrocatharsis, elemental transformation, ritual sacrifice, orgiastic bacchanalia, and the paradoxical merging of agony into ecstasy. In general, BPM-2 represents overwhelmingly intense elemental energies within a cathartic, transformational crucible that culminates in the experience of death and rebirth.
Wow.
Yeah, that's basic perinatal matrix 3. Very intense elemental energies due to the struggle for life and death and between life and death in the birth canal.
Given these several distinctive themes converging within one perinatal matrix, we found the consistent coincidence of BPM-3 experiences with transits of Pluto especially extraordinary, for the descriptions of the many-sided principle of Pluto by contemporary astrologers encompassed precisely the same convergence of diverse themes. Elemental intensity, depth, and power, that which compels, empowers, and intensifies whatever it touches, sometimes to overwhelming and catastrophic extremes. A dominant concern with survival, sexuality, or power, the lower chakras, the primordial instincts, both libidinal and aggressive, destructive and regenerative, the volcanic, cathartic, eliminative, transformative, ever-evolving, the biological processes of birth, sex, and death, the cycles of death and rebirth, breakdown, decay, and fertilization, violent purging of repressed energies, situations of life and death extremes, power struggles, all that is titanic, potent, and massive, the powerful forces of nature emerging from its chthonic depths, both within and without, the intense fiery underworld and underground in many senses.
Whoa. Pluto's not playing around, huh?
Yeah, Pluto's the archetype of power and intensity itself.
Geological, psychological, sexual, urban, political, criminal, demonic, mythological. Freud's primordial id, the broiling cauldron of the instincts. Darwin's ever-evolving nature and the biological struggle for existence. As with other perinatal matrices, subjects often had direct experience of specific mythic deities when reaching the deeper dimensions of that matrix. In the case of BPM-3, the mythic figures encountered tended to be the same as those brought up in the astrological texts describing the nature of the Pluto archetype. Deities of destruction and regeneration, descent and transformation, death and rebirth, such as Dionysus, Hades and Persephone, Pan, Priapus, Medusa, Lilith, Inanna, the volcano goddess Pele, Quetzalcoatl, Kundalini activation and the serpent power, Shiva, Shakti, Kali.
Pluto's about intensity, going through a process leading to transformation, going through difficulty that almost kills us, where we meet an initiation, shedding skin, shredding ego towards rebirth. Like the phoenix, something's dying, something's reborn. Pluto with other planets, hey. Pluto with sun, identifying with intensity, transformation. With the moon, emotional intensity, transformation. Mercury, mental intensity, transformation. Venus, transformation of the heart and intensity. Mars, forcing intensity, transformation. Jupiter, expanding intensity, transformation. Saturn, restricting, and then transformation. Uranus, liberating intensity, transformation. And Neptune, flowing with intensity, transformation. Pluto's the heavy archetype.
So now let's look at the archetype of Uranus, which is associated with basic perinatal matrix 4.
The fourth perinatal matrix is associated both biologically and archetypally with the emergence from the birth canal and the moment of birth. It is reflected in experiences of sudden breakthrough, unexpected liberation, release from constriction and imprisonment, brilliance of vision and understanding, awakening to a sense of deeper meaning and purpose in life, being flooded by intense bright light, sudden intellectual and spiritual illumination, the feeling of being reborn after a long and dangerous passage, and so forth. In its negative aspect, when activated but uncompleted, BPM-4 can take the form of manic inflation, restless impatience, eccentric ideation accompanied by a sense of unprecedented personal brilliance, insatiable craving for excitement, and compulsive hyperactivity. Having observed a correlation between BPM-4 experiences and major transits of Uranus, I was very much struck by how fully the set of symbolic meanings universally attributed to Uranus by contemporary astrologers coincides with the phenomenology of BPM-4. The astrological Uranus is typically described as the principle of sudden change, of unexpected openings and awakenings, creative breakthroughs and inventiveness, brilliance of inspiration and achievement, sudden illumination and flashes of insight. It is also associated with the impulse toward freedom, rebellion against constraints and the status quo, tendencies toward eccentric or erratic behavior, instability, restless unpredictability, the drive toward novelty and the new, the unexpected, the disruptive, the exciting, and liberating.
All right, so that's the archetype of Uranus, the astrological archetype of Uranus, also the association with basic perinatal matrix 4. So Uranus, the archetype of Uranus is associated with sudden change, fresh beginnings, the experience and the reliving and integrating of basic perinatal matrix 4 is coming out the other side of the plutonic kind of tunnel of the birth canal of a kind of struggle for life into the successful birth, into which includes its decompression and its opening up into broader dimensions of reality. And so we've got creative breakthroughs, rebellion against constraint. So it's associated in Greco-Roman mythologists with Prometheus, the Titan who liberates humans by stealing the fire of the gods and giving it to humans. Uranus, disruptive, the archetype of disruption, the rebel trickster energy, and as noted here, the shadow expression as well, noted in the reading from Way of the Psychonaut, is a kind of a fickle energy, an inability to commit, a kind of orienting towards the new and the exciting that does not allow for a grounded existence. So just like noted in that little reading, there's go through the psychedelic assisted healing and through our own kind of experiences of psychospiritual growth, when we have integrated BPM4, we have an integrated Uranus, we relived all the birth, all the different sections of birth, and they become integrated into our system. Then the BPM4 becomes the rewarding side of Uranus, which is associated with the higher chakras, with the liberation, with a sense of kind of the positive ending, the positive kind of reconciliation of everything that we've been through. Okay, so let's look at Uranus with the other planets briefly. So we've got Uranus with the sun. We have identifying with freedom. With the moon, it's that emotional sense of orientation towards freedom, like an emotional conditioning that involves the Uranian archetype. Either freedom is our comfort place, or we may have had an emotional conditioning that was a disruptive Uranus experience from childhood that kind of colors our life, and we want to integrate that into that more realized version of Uranus. Mercury, mental freedom, kind of the exciting mental processes. Venus, heart freedom, the association of love and freedom together. Mars, forceful freedom, that's kind of like a rebel warrior energy. We've got Jupiter, expanding freedom. So Jupiter and Uranus together make a especially interesting pair, in that Jupiter is associated with success, Uranus associated with liberation. So the two are like the successful birth, the sudden leap, the get out of jail free card, the windfall, the expansive uplifting liberation. Saturn with Uranus, that we have to balance between constraint and restriction of Saturn and rebellion and freedom of Uranus. Neptune and Uranus, flowing with freedom. So that can be a kind of Neptune is oftentimes associated with like spirituality. It can be kind of like a revolutionary spiritual outlook there. Pluto with Uranus is the powerful volcanic release of our liberation principle, of our rebel energy, or the rebel energy releasing our libidinal power. That's Pluto with Uranus.
Now we're going to talk about Albert Hofmann's birth chart. We're going to introduce a birth chart, and we're going to start with the father of LSD, Albert Hofmann, here pictured with Stanislav Grof. And he says, if I am the father of LSD, then Stan Grof is the godfather who brought my wonder child through a difficult time. Introducing Albert Hofmann's chart. Hey, basically, it's a circle with a bunch of symbols in there, right? Some symbols are close together. Some are far away from each other. What we're going to do, since we've been discussing the 4 basic perinatal matrices, is talk about Albert Hofmann's Uranus opposite Neptune and Uranus opposite Pluto. Looks like the father of LSD has some pretty good transpersonal aspects going on in his chart. if we see here this strange looking thing, we're looking at the two, what we're looking at is Uranus opposite Neptune and Uranus opposite Pluto. But this way, we can see how long they were together. As an example, we notice here, 1895, okay? So this Uranus opposite Pluto started around 1897, and it ran till about 1907. And this Uranus opposite Neptune started just before 1900 and ran till about 1919. So these are very long, slow-moving aspects. You notice they were together for many years, okay, from about 1899 to 1907. And that's when Albert Hofmann was born in 1906. So he carries the energy of those transpersonal planets. I wonder if they were working on him when he discovered LSD. I don't know, but it looks like it. What do you think about that, James?
Yeah, so when we're born, let's look at his birth chart again.
Okay.
So when we're born, the birth chart reflects where the planets were in the zodiac at the time of our birth. And so this is Albert Hofmann's chart. And yeah, so he was born exactly as Art illustrated during that period of Uranus, the Uranus opposition with Pluto overlapping with the Uranus opposition with Neptune. So these outer planets, when they come into alignment with each other, it's not very common because they move so slowly from our perspective, because they're so far away from the sun. So it's a rare moment in history during that time. That was a very potent time in history when a lot of the foundations for psychology were created at that time. There was a lot of kind of the development of spirituality in the West. That is really the foundations of what spirituality is now, also in the West. And so he was born during that time. And so he has that energy in his birth chart that he then carried forward in his life. And through, let's look at the Uranus opposite Pluto and Neptune. Yeah, so here we've got Uranus opposite Pluto and Neptune in his birth chart. And we can see how those energies he was born with, he carried them forward so that when he was an adult, he contributed to the kind of like, he contributed that energy of his birth to the world, but in a kind of a further, more advanced way by his efforts in chemistry, which created LSD, which was one of the catalysts for the 1960s, in which Uranus and Pluto were again together. So Uranus and Pluto were conjoined at that time. So that's the next iteration of the energy that he was born with. And he, being born with that energy during the next iteration, he demonstrated the next evolutionary step of that energy by creating LSD. And LSD is a very Uranus, Pluto, Neptune creation, because Uranus is the freedom principle, and Uranus frees up the Plutonic both elemental power and also ability to change and go through a kind of a fiery rebirth. And that was what happened in the 60s. There was this kind of fiery eruption that happened in the popular culture that was also a very transformative time. And with Uranus, with Neptune, that's also very kind of can be very much associated with psychedelic assisted healing, because Uranus is liberation and Neptune is a kind of associated with a sense of dissolving and a sense of unity. And there's very much kind of an ego dissolving association with psychedelic experience. So you can see how his Uranus, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune natal aspect really flowered brilliantly in as he created LSD in the like late 30s, early 40s, I think it was, but it was during the 1960s when his creation really started to appear on the world stage. Any thoughts, Art?
Yeah. Uranus and Neptune together. I have that as well in my chart. I know that really well. And if you've been in psychedelia and you've been in a really unitive and real warm and generous type of place where you can rest easy in a held environment where everything's okay, you might have that experience already. So just learning about Uranus and Neptune can bring you back there. That's what happened to me. It wasn't as if I was trying to learn these concepts and then relate them to my psychedelic experience. I have the full psychedelic experience already. So just learning about the archetypes helps me to understand them fuller and understand it better. So I'm happier. I'm not lost anymore. So that's why I found knowing these symbols, especially these outer planet symbols, helps so much, because you can hang your hat on the symbol, which provides all the understanding that you need. It's an archetype. It has a multivalent expression. It can be this or that, depending on what's happening. So it engages your mind in a great way. Whereas before, you're just having some big unitive experience, say, and wow, that's great. Yeah, let's go. But then if you can understand some of the ideas behind it, then you can start to see that in life every day. You start to see those experiences just everyday life. And it gets pretty satisfying. And you feel like you're on your way and you're with the universe because you're still having the deep experience, and you can continually work with it, even though you're not high or therapeutically in psychedelics. So thanks for joining us, everybody, at the Holotropic Psychedelic Integration Podcast, Episode 5. We're on the way to Denver for Psychedelic Science 2023. Hope to see you there. Please say hello. And I want to show you something I made, which we're going to be giving out at the festival or trade show, whichever the case may be. And it's the, oh, you can't see it too well. Let's see. It's the Holotropic Psychedelic Integration card. So if you see one of these, look on the back. Whoops. Look on the back, and it'll tell you all about what's happening. Okay. So thanks.
Yes, thank you so much. And yeah, if you're coming to Denver, we're in June 2023. If you're listening to this, coming to the big conference, Psychedelic Science 2023, then we're very much eager to meeting you.
And for the next episode, we're going to continue with Albert Hofmann's chart and review Psychedelic Science 2023.